All right, trying again. Here we go.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick Wagner.
It's Diana McAlintel, and we have just completed the NCCL convocation. And what's NCCL?
NCCL is National Conference for Catechetical Leadership, and they have a convocation, an annual convocation every year. This year, Team RCA, Diana and I were in charge of the liturgies, the worship experiences for the week, and we've been doing a series of videos sort of breaking down a behind-the-scenes look at each of the liturgies. So this is the final video in that series. We about 3 hours ago finished the commissioning liturgy, and then after that we had to break everything down and get it all packed up, and then we went out to lunch. And so we're now just back at the hotel, and we wanted to give you a look at what we did to put together the final liturgy.
So how many liturgies total did we do?
Let's see. We did 2 on the first day.
2 on Monday.
And then we did 1 on Tuesday. And we did 2 on Wednesday.
Yes.
We had Mass, so we had morning prayer Mass
Yes.
on Wednesday, and then we had 2 today.
Seven liturgies in 4 days.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. So today, this last video is focusing on the sending liturgy, the very last official thing of the convocation.
Right. So there were four movements or 4 focuses throughout the week. We started with longing, and then nurturing, then preparing, and today was commissioning. So we sent everybody out on mission at the end of the liturgy.
All right. So commissioning. Here's the thing. Here's the schedule of the participants. After our morning prayer, they had a general assembly, and then there was a keynote speaker. And then after the keynote speaker, they went into 4 different focus groups that they have been meeting in throughout the week, forum. And so they were in 4 different spaces, 4 different places in the hotel, but those meeting rooms were all in the same area. So I'll show you where they are. So there are 4 meeting rooms. There are 4 meeting rooms in this area here, and this little gathering space is where we began our liturgy.
So we had a cross out here, and Diana had the singing bowl, and our music leader was here. And just imagine everybody coming out these doors and milling around in the space, and then as you know, they didn't all get out at the same time, so they're kind of milling around, waiting, asking what's going on, you know, and all that was part of it. And then once everybody is out, Diana began by ringing the singing bowl.
Yep.
And then the music leader began by singing the Litany of Saints.
Yes,
and
we had the cross here as well. The cross we've been using every day.
And so the Litany of Saints, the music leader used the names of the participants, which was kind of cool.
So here we go. So we're going to show
walk
you
through the procession.
Yeah, we're going to show you the route that we took. Okay, so let's pretend Nick is the cross bearer. All right, look at that. What a great cross bearer.
So as you can see, this is just the regular hotel hallway. You can see the space out there where folks, sit and eat their Starbucks and snacks and ice cream and stuff like that. Look, here's a handsome young man right now.
Here's a random participant.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Let me turn around. This is John Michael Reyes. He's probably answered one of your questions.
Yes.
Hey, John Michael.
Hi.
So John Michael helped us with the liturgies throughout the week. John Michael's an expert in liturgy himself, and so it was great to have him here. But in his current job, they sent him here to get more connected to this organization and his work with a Catholic high school?
High school, lower and middle school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was great to have him here to help with this. So then we continued, but there were just hotel guests sitting around like this as we were, sort of processing with a cross and singing the Litany of Saints. So we went down this hallway. So there's about about 200 people?
100, and probably today there were
Yeah,
maybe
it's the last days.
150 people left.
Last day. So even so imagine 150 people in sort of a narrow, I don't know if you get a sense of how narrow the hallway is from my hands here. So it's not very wide. We've got 150 people singing the Litany of Saints as they're coming down this hallway.
Yeah, and there were just random people from the hotel stopping and looking at us.
So we have the cross here. And then we turn into this hallway, which is much bigger. And this is the entrance to the grand ballroom. And the grand ballroom is where we have been having our major meetings throughout the week. So we brought everybody to the end of this space, and we filled up this whole space with people singing the Litany of Saints. And again, the names of the saints were their names, so they're singing their names as we're processing here.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not even sure if the doors are open.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me see. No, so we're not able to go in there. So we'll have to just kind of describe what happened. But we got down to the end of this space. We're singing everybody's names, with the cross is leading us. And the point is, we're we're pilgrim people, and we're getting ready to go on mission. So the procession was kind of important. And we're going to process into the worship space / meeting space behind us, which we can't get into now because it's all locked up. But what we described it earlier, we had in there, all the way up front, we had a stage, a presiding area, an altar, but back here, more in the midst of the assembly, we had the ambo. Also up front, throughout the week, we've had the cross. Mm-hmm. For this liturgy, we moved the cross more into the midst of the community. And the prayer was focused on the reading from Acts, where we have people from every nation speaking all these languages, and yet everybody understood them. And then we did a litany to the Holy Spirit. As we did the litany to the Holy Spirit, we invited everyone to gather around the cross and face not toward the wall, but face toward the doors and toward the ambo. And then the leader of the organization, the executive director, stood up and read a message from Pope Francis. And the message from Pope Francis was about the role of catechists in the world and the great importance of teachers. Mm-hmm. And it was actually kind of moving, and I was getting a little teared up as we were hearing it. And then you should talk about what we did after that.
Oh. So after that, we sang. We did the blessing from Pentecost, the solemn blessing. Adapted it. Nick and I led that. And then I did an adapted dismissal, the traditional dismissal, something like, our convocation is ended, go in peace, hallelujah, hallelujah. And then we sang the response and all of that. And then we had this great song that Anna Betancourt led us in, go out to all the world.
So they're all facing the doors,
the
exit doors, and we're singing, go out, go out.
Yes. And so it really kind of reflected the idea of being sent, of being dismissed, commissioned out. So often when we talk about our faith, it's sort of talking to one another. And from the beginning of the procession to the end of it, where we're literally facing the doors through which we're supposed to go out, we're trying to say, being church is not about being in the building of the church, but about living the faith out in the world, and that's how we be church.
So if there was a sort of liturgical focus to this one, I would say it's the sense of procession, that we're a church on the move, and sort of turning the church around. So Pope Francis says we have to go out. We can't get stuck inside the walls of the church, and sort of physically get the assembly to face the doors instead of facing the altar for the final blessing and the final song. Was very powerful witness, powerful symbol about what the posture the church is supposed to have in the world.
Yeah. So if there's any primary liturgical principle to this is use the space that you have and realize that your space is not limited to the church space inside the doors.
Right.
Your entire parish campus, the parking lot, the sidewalk, the entryways, the hallways, all of that is liturgical space if you prepare well and use it carefully, so that people are able to do the work that they're called to do. So don't be afraid to be public about your ritual. I mean, the liturgy itself is public. It's not a private action.
Yeah. So let's see. I think the liturgy itself is a little shorter, so I think our video is a little shorter. There's not as much to break apart in this. Just a couple of basic liturgical principles that we focused on in every liturgy, and every Sunday liturgy focuses on. This is all rooted in the Word. So there was proclamation of the Word at all of our liturgies, and the importance of full conscious participation. So we talked in one of the other videos a lot about who the participants were at this event and how we tried to shape the prayer to encourage their participation.
Yes.
You had to enculturate the liturgy, so it would be part of this culture, of this community at this time, and they'd feel more encouraged to participate. Yeah. And the one we talked about this morning is that even though there's themes throughout the week, the core theme is always the Paschal mystery. It's always focused on the death and resurrection of Jesus and our participation in that mystery.
Yeah. And if we could summarize all of the principles that we've talked about this week, maybe one way I might summarize it is pay attention to the 4 liturgical arts.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
So 4 liturgical arts that every good liturgy should include, whether it's a big arena mass or a very simple liturgy for a small group of people. Every liturgy should include attention to the word. So the spoken word, the proclaimed word, but also the prayers, but also the silent word.
Yes.
And so silence had forefront in our prayer today. So the liturgical art of word and proclamation. The second liturgical art is music, and the sense of rhythm. And so rhythm in terms of musical rhythm, but also the rhythm of the liturgical ritual itself.
Or the flow.
Yes.
And so that the music isn't just well-performed music, but it's music that, again, engenders participation. The music is a servant to the rite. It doesn't dominate the rite.
And it's not plug-and-play music, meaning
Right.
the musicians wait for their turn and then they start singing and then they tune out until it's time again to sing. It really is ritual music that weaves in and out of the spoken prayer of the silences and is ritual prayer itself. So that's the second liturgical art. The third liturgical art, environment. You want to say something about that?
Yeah, so again, we're in a hotel ballroom, and so there was an environment committee, and they did a great job of making this, even though we had to have our meetings in there also, they made it look like a worship space. And where we decided to place, that we had an altar, and where we decided to place it, we had a massive cross, and the decision to place the ambo in the midst of the assembly. All those are liturgical environment sort of things. And then one thing Diana would do is invite people to, even though it's a meeting space, we have our papers all over our table and our books and our computers.
Coffee cups and
everything.
everything.
She said, as much as you can, try to clear your space for prayer so that, you make your table a sacred environment for the time that we're praying. So we get in the attitude into people that no matter how little or how great my influence is over the environment, all of us can help contribute to a prayerful environment, physical environment.
Another thing about environment is that you want to treat environment not as the plants and the fabrics and the colors and all of that, although that's important. The primary environmental element is the people. How will the people interact and engage with one another within the space that you are preparing for them to do this prayer? And so think of environment primarily as the people themselves. And so we tried to utilize their posture, their walking, starting in different places, which way they're facing. All of these things are part of environment. Another thing about environment is scale. So I wish you're just going to have to find pictures of this, but we borrowed a cross from the Diocese of Orange Office of Worship. Hey, Lisa Truxaw, thanks for all your help. And it was a beautiful, big cross, simple cross, but big, so that even if you are standing in the back of the ballroom, it stood out. And something that the Environment Committee did so well for this, and we didn't direct them with anything. They really took this on. They used very simple fabric elements to draw attention to the cross. So if you see pictures, you'll notice that there's a fabric that runs along the back wall behind the main stage. And if you follow that fabric, your eye is naturally organically drawn to the cross itself, which had been such a primary symbol for us throughout the week.
So the three liturgical arts so far are word, music, environment. The fourth liturgical art is movement. Mm-hmm. So the movement we already talked about, moving from their meeting space into this hallway space and then into the worship space, and then moving people potentially out, having them face outward. Mm-hmm. Also included in movement is any kind of gestures. So there was one point that everybody was clapping and swaying during the music, and I'm not sure that was planned, but the music just led us to into that sort of an action. Mm-hmm. Anytime we raise our hands in blessing, or when we share a sign of peace, all those kinds of movements are ways, movements and gestures are things that add to the focus on Paschal mystery, the focus on the embodiment of Christ in one another.
Mm-hmm. Part of the gesture during our week for blessing one another included not laying on of hands, but placing hands on one another's shoulders. So kind of reminiscent of the posture of godparents and sponsors. And so that simple gesture is liturgical, is a ritual action itself. Anything else about movement? Oh, you want to say something about communion, the procession of communion, how we paid attention to where the stations were going to be?
Well, this is back to the Mass.
Yeah, going back to Mass. Sorry.
So this was yesterday, but yeah, we looked at how people are going to actually walk up and share in communion. So just paying attention, we're just not going to assume they're going to know what to do. So we had to imagine exactly where the communion ministers were going to be stationed, and then we imagined, will that automatically draw people in the right direction, or do we need to give them direction? Do we need to get ushers or some verbal direction? And ideally, you set up the space in such a way that the movement naturally flows. And with the givens that we had in this space, we were able to do that. Yeah. So there was no verbal instruction. Folks just naturally knew how to move for this. But that's not always the case. And I've seen some parish worship spaces that are built oddly, and people don't know how to get to communion. So all of that is stuff that liturgy planners have to take into account.
Another thing about the communion procession is that it's really significant that people are walking toward the altar. And sometimes when we have assemblies that are larger, we cut off that liturgical action of moving toward the altar by trying to be more efficient and placing some communion ministers halfway down the center aisle or
worse,
in
back
space.
In the vestibule when people are walking
away
from the
altar. So to avoid that cutting off of the movement toward the altar, first we made sure we had enough communion ministers for the number of people who were going to be in the assembly. And so a good formula, so we have a little disagreement about this, but I tend to use one host minister per 100 people in the assembly. Nick tends to use two host ministers for every 100 people in the assembly. But the point is you want to make sure you have enough for the number of people in your assembly. And then depending on how many host ministers you have, you assign 2 cup ministers for every host minister. So if you have 2 host ministers, then you'll have 4 cup ministers. And so we had more than enough communion ministers, which made the communion procession
we had six
very
bread
reasonable.
ministers, host ministers,
Yes,
and so that meant
yes.
we had 12. Well, we actually wound up with 11
'Cause we
cup
were
ministers.
missing a
No,
child.
because the way
Oh,
the way
yeah.
the space was set
Yeah.
up, the music,
Yeah.
the musicians sort of flooded over into the spot where we would have put a 12th cup. And so just because of the space, we cut that one. But we had close to double the number of cups that we had for bread.
Yeah, but really, you don't want communion to go so long that it starts feeling unreasonable, and you would be able to avoid that by making sure you have more communion ministers than is necessary, than is needed for that, right?
Well, again, that's sort of harkening back a little
Yeah,
bit to the
sorry,
Mass,
sorry,
which is fine.
sorry.
But just to wrap up this liturgy was all about sending out. We wanted to, it had a basic structure, liturgy of the word. We've been doing liturgy of the hours. We switched to liturgy of the word for this one because we wanted more of a, folks are more familiar with that, and we wanted more of a sense of solidity as they're going out, that they know exactly what to do. They've got a real sense of I've got this. They got a sense of this is our tradition, and we're going to bring this out into the world and proclaim the good news.
So, and I think that's what our participants are going to do. So a lot of the comments that we heard about the liturgies this week were along the lines of how it felt like the liturgies were central to the work of the gathering, rather than sort of secondary sessions that were optional.
Right.
Not that we required people to come to the liturgies, but that they felt like they were foundational.
You felt like you had to be there.
Yeah, they were foundational to the rest of the day and the rest of the week, and they set the tone, and they were the content of the week itself. And so we're really grateful that the Spirit was able to make all of that happen through all of our limited resources, but also through the generosity of so many volunteers.
We had lots and lots. We had pages of volunteers.
We had about 150 volunteers from all over the U.S. doing that, plus so many amazing music ministers coming from all over the Orange County and Los Angeles. So liturgy really is the work of the people, and a lot of people have to work to make it work.
And this has been a lot of work, but it's also been a lot of fun and a lot of joy, and a real honor for us to be part of this national convocation, and we're grateful to have been part of it.
Yes. So we're going to take a nap now. And so thanks for watching all of these videos. Again, we'll place these all on YouTube, and you can watch every single one of them if you'd like. I'm guessing there are at least 6 or 7 of them here. So thank you again. I hope these were helpful, and continued blessings to you in the work that you do.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
God bless.